If you would like a guide to all the films in the season, send a cheque or postal order for £3, payable to BSS, to Filmworks, PO Box 7, London W3 6XJ.
I'm often considered to be a funny kind of Englishman.
So exotic, so original. It's
Such a contribution. A new breed, as it were. Having emerged from two old histories.
You're not Indian, Kareem. You've never even been to India.
I don't know why, but I always wanted to be somewhere else.
If you lay one of your black hands near my daughter, I'll smash it with a hammer. We're with Enoch.
I don't care. Englishman I am, though not proud of it. From the South London suburbs and going somewhere.
Hanif Qureshi's The Buddha of Suburbia, starting Wednesday the 3rd of November on BBC2.
And there's a nostalgic trip back to the 70s, the decade of glam rock, glitter and gurus in the new issue of Radio Times, together with complete listings for all television and satellite channels. Snooker fans will be pleased to hear that there's a chance to catch up on the day's action in Reading with an hour of edited highlights coming up in 30 minutes. We may prefer the considered deliberation of the chess masters as we round up the week's news from the rival World Championships with Francine Stock.
The London match is over. World champion Garry Kasparov defeated Nigel Short and retained the right to call himself the world's #1 chess player. But in Indonesia, the rival World Championship battle is still being fought out between former world champion Anatoly Karpov and the Dutchman Jan Timman. Good evening and welcome to the BBC's coverage of the World Chess Championships. This evening I'm joined by Bill Hartston, chess correspondent of The Independent, David Norwood, international grandmaster, and Dominic Lawson, editor of The Spectator and friend of Nigel Short. On Friday, Nigel Short conceded defeat in the Times World Championship match at the Savoy in London. We'll be looking back over that match in a moment. But first, we're going to bring you up to date with the other World Championship match taking place under the auspices of FIDE, the International Chess Federation in Jakarta, Indonesia. The second half of that match began last Sunday, and before it did, Anatoly Karpov's trainer, Ron Henley, talked to us about the strengths and weaknesses of both players. First, his own man, Karpov.
He has a tremendous ability to assimilate, almost like a vacuum cleaner, whatever is presented to him by other grandmasters who do work from him and consult with him from time to time. He has a very fine ability to be able to take the best from each one and assimilate it, and thus goes towards building up like almost the perfect chess-playing machine. Anatoly's weaknesses. Well, to start with, there are very few. But one thing that did show up is he makes more mistakes during the course of a game than he used to, say, 10 years ago. If you look at the match with Kasparov in New York, Lyon, he made, at several key junctures, he made like one-move mistakes that threw away tremendous chances. And I would say this is probably his biggest weakness at this point. Sometimes he seems to start out a little sluggish. Sometimes it seems like he almost has trouble getting going. As far as Jan's strengths and weaknesses, one of his biggest strengths and weaknesses is the fact that he plays such a large variety of openings. And of course this is good and it makes you more difficult to prepare for. But the weakness of it is that he's not necessarily as thoroughly prepared in some of the less main lines. And so this is both a strength and possibly an Achilles heel.
Well, when we came off air on Thursday, the score in the FIDE match stood at 9.5, 5.5 in Karpov's favour. Jan Timman's second, Yasser Sarawan, brought us up to date with the two games that have been played since.
Well, Game 16 was pretty much a disaster, with Karpov winning yet another very smooth model victory. What he did is he got an opening where he was a great specialist in, and he got a great deal of spatial control, and he pressed Jan down, got a material advantage, and unfortunately just very, very smoothly snuffed all of Jan's attempts to fight back into the match right out of the position, and won a very smooth game, and I think handily wrapped up the match. Game 17 was a very complicated affair. It was an advanced Caro-Kann. Timman was going all out for the win, as of course he needed to, and he came very close to getting it. At one moment, had he played instead the move 25, Rook D4, we were all holding our breath, hoping it would happen, and he would finally score a second win in the match, and he didn't get it. He missed the move, and Karpov made a smooth draw after that. So everything is going wrong, even when positions call to be won.
When we spoke to Ian Rogers last Thursday, he effectively was writing Timman off at that stage. You're saying that he's still fighting pretty hard to keep going?
Oh, definitely. Jan's a very optimistic person. He's a great fighter at the chessboard. He definitely has his whole career wrapped up in this match. He wanted to make the best impression he could, and even though he's way down in the match score, he was really hoping to pull off a victory or two before Karpov could claim overall victory in the match.
So has the match itself been well attended?
The admission price is pretty expensive, so there isn't a great deal of, say, official ticket purchasers. But outside the playing arena, where they have monitors that people can watch for free, there are really throngs of people. Here in Jakarta, there's a great deal of journalists and media attention devoted to the match. Even when we arrived in the airport, over 100 journalists were there to greet us, and we had an impromptu press conference right there at the airport. So the match has been attended very well in the press, on TV, radio, and so on. A lot of people forget that Asia, with its many, many people, are really interested in chess, and that FIDE has a very strong role here in the Asian countries, right on through to China, of course, as well. So you're seeing a great deal of attention focused on this match, and of course on the Nigel Short-Garry Kasparov match.
Yes, what about the two protagonists there in Jakarta? Have they been watching what Short and Kasparov have been doing in London, and what do they think of it?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's always tit for tat. And Karpov, of course, is extremely pleased with himself, having been quoted the other day as saying that he's +5, meaning he has 5 more victories than his opponent, and that this is equal to Garry Kasparov's score over Nigel Short. So he's very, very pleased with himself.
Well, let's look now at one of the highlights from the last game, Game 17. Bill Hartston.
What the hell, let's look at the whole game from the top. This is, I think, a rather uncharacteristic game for the match. Timman playing white. It's a lightweight, cheerful bash compared with some of the heavyweight positional games they've been playing. So Karpov playing this Caro-Kann defence, which has been his main defence to e4. Sticks the pawn here and then challenges in the centre with this one. And Timman in earlier games had defended his pawn on this square with the knight. This time he pushes the pawn. And it's clear he's in a aggressive, impatient mood, pushing the pawn up to attack the bishop.
I think white needs to be quite aggressive in this position because the bishop has actually come out of the sort of pawn chain. Notice the pawn's stuck on d5 and e6. In a French defence, the bishop is stuck on c8. So there's a lot of advantages in black's positioning that bishop, which is normally clogged in, is already on a very useful diagonal. So white needs to play very quickly and aggressively.
And what white's trying to do is bring a knight here to attack the bishop, and then he usually chases it with a pawn here and here as well. Trying to take advantage of the bishop's being unable to get back behind its pawns. Now black challenging the white centre. The pawn coming up to chase the bishop. So what's happening now is that immediately after 6 or 8 moves, white's whole central position is falling apart. When black takes this, it'll undermine the support to this. And white is at the same time threatening to chase that bishop to its death.
Black has the position, but white's got the temporary initiative in the attack, so it's who can get in there first.
Now that pawn stops white's pawn advancing to the same square.
And it wrecks White's position. If White pushes the g-pawn now to g5, then it would be a dreadful position. He would have so many holes. So he needs to keep playing very actively.
But his whole point of the pawn move here was to lure black into playing this pawn up, so that when the knight comes here and takes the bishop, he can no longer recapture the way he wanted to with the pawn on that square. So it all makes a certain tactical sense, but in the meantime his centre's falling apart. So the knight takes the bishop now, pawn recaptures, and black's got two extraordinarily weak pawns. Sometimes he has to bring his king out here to defend them, which doesn't look very happy.
But White's centre's fallen apart, as you see. The e5 pawn's undermined, d4's undermined.
And they all fall apart in a minute.
Yeah.
Now the knight coming to defend this pawn, anticipating White's knight coming out to attack it. Knight's attacking this one as well.
It looks like d4's falling off the board, doesn't it?
That's gone.
Yeah.
Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Chaos is released upon
It is
the world.
total chaos, isn't it? Everyone's, well, the e6 pawn's a bit weak. The e5 pawn's
Well, White
weak.
can take this pawn at once
Right,
if
everything's
he
falling
wants
apart.
to,
It's
but
crumbling.
he played instead bishop out here, so that the bishop is on the same diagonal as the pawn now.
I think he wants to give the king a running square as well. Perhaps to f1 at some point.
So White's whole centre, which was his claim for space at move 3, has collapsed.
He's clearing away the mess. He's got some good open files now.
And he wants to get at black's king. So black's knights supporting each other. There goes the centre pawn. And we're only...
This looks a bit like short Casper.
We're 14 moves into the game, and no, they seem to have played the middle game before they've almost started the opening. Both kings still in the centre. Queen checking. The queen was attacked by the knight on that square, so it got out the way with gain of time. Queen checking. No one castles in these games. King moves out the way.
The white king's actually quite safe. That's very important. It's the black king that's in danger. But there again, I think black's some pawns up, I'd say.
Well, with what black's real danger is that the queen and king are on the same line. So if this knight ever gets chased away, white will have a deadly check. But really, this is more roulette than chess, because you can't calculate what's going to happen in positions like these. You just have to do the best you can and see what turns up.
Is it Dutch roulette or Russian roulette?
Both. What on earth is going on? It's a mess, isn't it?
It's
just silly.
Complete and utter mess.
The black king can't castle either way because of that knight on e6. He's a very cheeky little horse. It stops the king.
So White's king has tucked itself away behind empty spaces. It looks very
White's
vulnerable there.
staking everything on the weakness of the black king, I think.
White can always take this pawn with check with his knight, but it's not clear how the knight gets out after that.
No, he doesn't want to do that. It's a double pawn.
The knight's too good anyway. Now black's trying to exchange queens. That'll solve the problem of his king. Karpov wants to keep queens on the board.
Timon wants to keep.
Yeah.
I think Timon is the one trying.
Timmon's right.
Really so confused.
It's a very confusing.
I thought Karpov was playing both colours here. So now White's threatening.
G6.
Queen takes this pawn.
Well, at some point, a rook's coming to e1 as well, which would be quite painful.
Yeah.
This looks pretty grim for black, actually.
But
Karpov
the
always
knight
wriggles out of these anyway.
Defending this pawn and attacking White's queen.
Yeah, but you can whop off on d4 there.
He did.
Yeah, why not? He's winning his pawns back, that's the thing.
And the queen coming now to exchange queens. If the white queen retreats here, for instance, I think black's queen has a
Queen
rather
g4
horrid
check
check on
winning
that
the
square,
knight, yeah.
picking up this
Well, material is temporarily
rotten
level,
knight.
isn't it?
It's like, the mess is clear.
always is in messy positions. Have you noticed that?
It always ends up level. Yeah.
Or is he going to lose a g pawn or something?
No, it's about...
And now white can't take this pawn because
can't.
black's king would come here, and the
trap
knight's
it.
got nowhere. It's dead. Yeah.
White must still be a
They
bit
need
better
to.
here, because black's pawns are weak and the king's still in the centre. I still like Timon's
So
position.
king attacking the knight. Got to do something about that. Retreats.
Bishop. Oh, the rook's
Bishop.
coming into
And
the
a
game.
rook check. King
White's
over.
much better here. This is very strong.
And now they said after the game that the right move was the rook to come here And white should just be trying to put pressure on this pawn.
Rook d4 is a very natural move, isn't it? It's a very clear, obvious move. Rook d4, you go into e4.
He went for the attack.
Silly boy.
And it looks very good because it's hard to find a square for black's king. The move Karpov played is quite extraordinary, putting the king on the same diagonal as the bishop.
So there's no
white's
good...
knight has got 7 discovered checks, but none of them turns out to be any good. Goes back here with check, king gets out the way, came back with another check, king back there, try another one. So just a rook into the centre, you leave the king on the same diagonal as the bishop.
It's very frustrating, this, isn't it?
Another check from the bishop. Also no use. It's extraordinary. There's nothing in black's position that you can win. So a knight check, king over. And then he had another go to try to exchange bishops and rejoin his own pawns, but Karpov wouldn't take it.
That's such a Karpov move.
Bishop back, back to where he came from, king over. And then they gave up and agreed to draw. Level position. And it's typical of the problems that Timman's been having in this match. He gets these wonderful attacking positions, then finds himself beating his head against a brick wall.
It was reversed pretty quickly. Great, well that was game 17 of the FIDE match in Jakarta in 8 minutes, courtesy of Bill Hartston. BBC2 will continue to follow that FIDE match and we'll bring you up to date in our next programme, that's in a week's time. Back now to the match in London, where this week Nigel Short was finally defeated by the world champion Garry Kasparov. Here's how the match developed, step by step. It all began with a good defensive performance by Short, playing black in game 1, until he lost by overstepping the time limit in a superior, perhaps even winning position. The next 3 games brought only 1 draw for Short, so after game 4 it was 3.5 to a half to Kasparov. 2 more draws were followed by a brilliant win for Kasparov in game 7, and game 8 was almost a brilliant win for Short. He sacrificed both rooks, massed his pieces around Kasparov's king, but fine defence by Kasparov and one inaccuracy from Short resulted in another draw. Game 9 ended with an extraordinary hiccup when, in what should have been a simple endgame, Kasparov blundered to give Short a chance to escape with a draw. Short missed it, and it was 7-2 to Kasparov. The 4th week began with Short's biggest missed chance of the match. A queen sacrifice brought him to the brink of victory, but in time trouble he missed several chances to force Kasparov's resignation, another draw. The next 4 games were drawn too. A clean kill by Kasparov in game 15 extended his lead to 6 points. The bookmakers were now offering odds on Short failing to win a single game. His one win, however, came in game 16, when Kasparov's risky attempts to attack were punished by some powerful play by Short. With Short's dignity somewhat restored by the win, both men seemed content to avoid further accidents, and the match rolled to its conclusion with 4 more draws. Well, throughout the games, Nigel Short's performance has attracted vociferous supporters and detractors. But right up to the last moment, there was at least one onlooker down at the Savoy who was confident about his prospects in the final game.
I think he's got to definitely win today, because he's a very confident man. The Russian geezer, he's got 2 mats on his head. I see it the other day, he's sweating, you know what I mean? But,
Finally then, Nigel Short succumbed to the overwhelming skill of Garry Kasparov and managed to win only 1 game in the entire match. So how did spectators at the Savoy assess his performance?
I think he's made a tremendous effort, and as a result, I've taken up chess myself seriously. So my son, who is just 6 years old, I think he's become interested in chess as well.
I'm very pleased that he's got so far. It's a great honour for the country and a great honour for him, and let's hope next time he wins, eh?
Well done, Nigel Short.
It's a real shame that he hasn't won more games than he has.
I'll just say good luck. I'm sorry that he didn't do as well as we all anticipated he might.
Well, Dominic Lawson, as a friend of Nigel Short, how do you think that Nigel himself assesses the match?
Well, I spoke to him immediately afterwards, and I think he was quite pleased with his performance. I think that he regarded 7.5 points as very respectable. In fact, it was 1.5 points more than their ratings before FIDE took them away would have suggested he would get. And I think that he feels very proud of the fact that he held his own in the last 10 games. And what he said to me was, you should look in groups of 10. And he said, the 10 games I played against Kasparov before the match, I scored 15%, 1.5 points. The first 10 games of this match, I scored 25%. And the last 10 games of this match, I scored 50%, so I'm getting there. And I think that's a reasonable way of looking at it.
What effect has the whole match had on the British chess world, has it?
Well, it's been fantastic publicity. Like, I've been on telly a lot for a start. Which is, no, it's a great way of actually bringing chess to the public, and of course it's been fantastic. But hopefully it can. Well, can we keep it up? Keep up the momentum.
But do you think, in some ways, that it has been slightly overhyped? That in the great build-up that it was given wasn't in fact borne out by attendances or indeed the level of support generally? Bill?
I think for the match itself, that's true, but for the publicity the whole thing's given chess, I'd agree with what David said, and the chess book sales have trebled, chess club memberships are possibly going up. Well, whether the interest will be sustained, I don't know.
Chess is almost becoming sexy.
Well, not go too far. Anyway,
not the players there.
Let's press on. This match has attracted interest for two reasons. Above all, Nigel Short is the first British player this century to reach the final of a World Championship. But this has also been a maverick match organised by a breakaway group, the PCA, or Professional Chess Association. And here's how this new association and the resulting match has been greeted by the chess world.
Truth to tell, the international support we have is near total. I think out of the top 20 grandmasters, say Mr. Kasparov and Mr. Short, you could probably have just one or two from them, people who are in their entourage. All the rest have played in our interzonal tournament. They have signed a document saying that they will complete the cycle with FIDE. Everyone who was there signed. Some of them had already left. We were doing this. Some of our people tried to do it only in the last day, and many of them had already left. But we got 9 of the 10 people, for instance, who qualified for the next leg, and 30 others. And so there you are. That's the answer. We have almost total support from the grandmasters.
Well, one has to remember that FIDE has a great infrastructure. Their membership is comprised of 150 nations, 150 national federations, including the British Chess Federation. So they've been in power for the last 50-odd years, and they're not going to relinquish it. The PCA, conversely, has to build up an infrastructure. It has to play its zonals and interzonals and championships and candidates matches, and FIDE has an old hand on this. One of the questions that was asked Karpov recently, would he like a reunification match with Garry Kasparov? And he said absolutely not, because he's the champion of the world by FIDE, and Kasparov and the PCA are going to collapse, and so he's not worried at all. And he's expecting that Garry Kasparov would actually, in the future, some stage, have to go back through the FIDE cycle. So his feeling is he's in a seat of power, and he doesn't want a challenge with Garry Kasparov, probably because he would lose it, but that's another point. But FIDE, from my perspective, will remain strong even after the bungling of the second half of this match. And it's been a terrible blow to their credibility. Had the match continued, then it would have been in Oman, pardon me, then it would have been quite fine, and PCA would have been in great trouble. As it is, there's some uncertainty in the chess world, and I think that's too bad.
Like in any other organization to which he belongs, he ends up fighting with authority. He fought his authority in Azerbaijan, he fought his authorities in Moscow, he fought his own GMA, and now he's fighting FIDE, and I'm certain that he will get into trouble in the PCA as well.
I don't think that the newly founded PCA has that much credibility, and my experience is that any organization or association led by Kasparov will soon collapse because of his personal influence, which is just totally against any democratic principle. And so I fear for the future, especially because there will be a power struggle going on, which will have a bad influence on the sponsor climate.
If they're watching this, again, to us, we have no animosity at all against Kasparov or Nigel Short. To them, to us, they are all brothers too. Our philosophy, and this is universal, it's gens una sumus. So anytime. But if there's going to be any reunion again, it should come from them, because they started this. So hopefully they come again within the big family.
Our doors are always open. But it is they who ran away. We didn't kick them out of our own. You know, they initiated the move, and if there's any move to be taken towards any reconciliation, why is everyone talking about reconciliation? I'm a man of peace. As you know, I don't come out fighting a big media war, and I don't. I hesitate to give interviews, you know. But therefore, if there's any move that's to be done, it will have to come from them.
Well, Dominic, isn't it inevitable that both Kasparov and Short will, as a number of speakers said there, have to go back through the FIDE system as their
Well, it was a very interesting, unbiased selection of speakers you chose. All FIDE representatives, very good BBC.
Well, that was the FIDE. That was the FIDE.
You said how the chess world would look at it. All you showed was FIDE representatives. But anyway, let that pass. I think that it's not clear. I mean, what was very interesting is FIDE had their first step on the road to their next World Championship, which was a interzonal, so-called interzonal tournament. And the winner was a Belarusian grandmaster called Boris Gelfand, one of the very strongest players in the world. And he said after he won it, I did not feel I was taking part in the World Championship event, and whoever wins this cycle will not have the right to call himself the strongest player in the world because he is outside. And I thought it was fascinating that he should say that. And I think the problem is that he's a very young, ambitious player. And we've spoken earlier about the attraction of money, how this might pull players towards the PCA. But even if you leave the money aside, and that is important for chess professionals, I think the very young, most ambitious players, people like him, Kramnik, Anand, of course Short, who want to be considered world champion, will want to play Kasparov. And I think that this is in fact the biggest thing, aside from the money, which follows that in the PCA's favour.
Bill, isn't it a good idea to have parallel organisations anyway? Surely it can't do any harm.
It can if they're both trying to run things they call the World Championship. You don't want two world champions. Dominic keeps talking about the strongest player in the world and the World Championship. These are two separate things. You're using your terms sometimes synonymously and sometimes differently. You said Kasparov retained his title as strongest player in the world, which is true. It's sure that all the best players will want to play the strongest player in the world, but I think when Kasparov loses to somebody, there will then be unity again. I think that somebody will want to play the FIDE World Champion. Professional chess needs professional organisation. It always has, but this wasn't the way to set about it.
To bring out another point which was mentioned there, that Kasparov has a reputation for tremendous volatility, and any organisation they were saying that he was associated with will therefore be also subject to that volatility. Do you think that's a danger?
Well, I think Kampramanis is an immensely volatile man, and I suspect that whoever runs the PCA could not do as bad or indeed mad a job as Kampramanis has done, such as stopping matches in the middle and lying about prize funds, which Bill fell for, as well as many other journalists. I think the point is that the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I mean, if Kasparov behaves badly, the thing will fall apart. There's no question about that. And it's up to him to prove that he can mend his ways and behave more responsibly than perhaps he has acted within the GMA. And we'll just have to see. There's no other way of finding out.
I think if Kasparov had declared UDI at any time other than just before a World Championship match, if he'd taken his title and said, I want to reorganise the World Championship, I want to bring in professional organisation, this would have been fine. This is my complaint about the whole thing, doing it just at the end of a FIDE World Championship cycle. This is what leaves a sour taste about the whole of the PCA.
But looking forward to the future, Dominic is essentially right. We'll wait and see. Like, Kasparov has an awful track record when it comes to things like democracy and this sort of stuff. But, you know, I'm willing to be shown that the PCA will be a fantastic new force and bring in lots of money and we'll all be happy. But I think we should all view the future with some suspicion.
But do you think it's possible to have two titles in tandem?
Yeah, I think we have two titles in tandem. And,
it's happened before, actually. In 1928, Bogolyubov played a match with Erva, and Erva was called FIDE champion, because FIDE had been in existence for 4 years. And they played a match, and Bogolyubov won. Not many people have heard of Bogolyubov now. And he was called FIDE champion. And the following year, he played a match against Alekhine, who was the world champion in the Kasparov mold. And the FIDE championship effectively lapsed at that point. So
but Erva was the FIDE amateur champion.
Yeah, and they're the amateur champion here because it's not clear they're playing for any money. It's a professional championship and the amateur championship.
Maybe Dominic will be world champion after all this.
But immediately for Nigel Short, let's come back to the focus of our attention for the last few weeks. What's he going to do?
Well, I think what he told me is he doesn't want to play chess for quite a long time. He's actually very, very tired, and he's a man of enormous energy. It's one of the things which has characterized him. But he's very tired. I think he feels that he will in 2 years' time, because the PCA cycle is actually shorter than the FIDE cycle, that he will be ready to play Kasparov again. And as Kasparov said yesterday, that he thought probably Short was his most likely challenger.
John McNaughton, thank you. David Norwood, Bill Hartston. That's it for tonight. If you want more details on the FIDE match, there is a recorded information line on 0891 800 313. There'll also be a BBC booklet featuring all the games from both matches, available at a cost of £5 from this address. BBC Chess Booklet, PO Box 7, London W3 6XJ. Cheques should be made payable to BSS. BBC2's coverage of the FIDE match returns next Sunday. We'll leave you now with pictures from Jakarta. Good night.
This week, BBC2 examines the influence of the Thatcher era. The Papers, reviewed by Sir Bernard Ingham. The Children.
I'm glad she's gone, because she wasn't very good at all. They won several elections, and she stayed in for 10 years, so it must say something about how good she was.
The Humour.
For sacrificial lambs, which one is the black sheep?
One of them is a living saint, the most wonderful, staggeringly beautiful and charitable woman in the world. According to the Telegraph.
The People.
Well, I think Mrs. Thatcher's most lasting achievement was to raise the whole standing of Britain.
The End.
We're leaving Downing Street for the last time after 11.5 wonderful years.
You know, you've had Genghis Khan, you've had Napoleon. I mean, I suppose you could rank her in the same breath.
After Margaret. This week on BBC2.
Now on BBC2, the last programme this evening finds us heading back out to the Hexagon at Reading, where David Vine is burning the midnight oil.
We're still here. I'm glad you are. Welcome to the Late Late Show. There'll be plenty more this week here from the Skoda Grand Prix at the Hexagon in Reading. First of all, the situation update. Yesterday, Steve Davis and Peter Ebdon both going through to the quarter-finals. And today, Ken Doherty joined them, having knocked out the champion Jimmy White 5 frames to 3. And now the match tonight between the former champion of the world, John Parrott, and the 18-year-old Scot, John Higgins. Well, Higgins went off like a rocket. He took the opening frame. It looked like he was going to take the second as well. Back came Parrott with a brilliant break of 72. You may well have seen it earlier, to deliver the match at 1 frame all. Let me take you on to frame 3. And as we join it, it's John Higgins having potted a red back at the table.